Week 2 of the 2021 NFL season was a certified roller coaster because it started off on a really bummer note with a bunch of quarterbacking injuries on the early slate, and we never want to see that. Those really suck. And then the afternoon games come around, and all of a sudden we've got some chaos. We've got some fun games. We've got some big DFS scores and some exciting players doing exciting stuff. Sunday Night Football, pretty fun as well. So there's a lot to process from week 2. We're going to break it all down, let you know what it means from a DFS perspective, and get you set for week number 3. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Joined here, as always, by Brandon Gadula. He is the managing editor for numberFire.com. Brandon, week 2 is mostly in the books. How are you doing today?
I'm good. We had a really slow start, like you said, to week 2, and then the afternoon games and then the Sunday night game were pretty phenomenal. But I'm having a hard time moving past the fact that you were just singing some Fall Out Boy right before we recorded.
Was I?
Yeah.
What did I sing?
It's one of their newer songs, that Light 'Em Up song.
Is that Fall Out Boy?
Yeah. And I was going to say, if you're going to sing some Fall Out Boy, you got to go a little bit older than their new stuff, which isn't.
I didn't know that was them, honestly. Why did I sing that song? I don't remember singing that song fully. So,
yeah, you were singing it right.
Possible I blacked out.
Yeah, I guess, but you were singing it right before you flipped the switch to turn us on.
Oh, yeah. Okay, Light 'Em Up. Yeah, I was light 'em up. Okay, so there we go. Apparently, I know Fall Out Boy. Didn't know that I knew that, but hey, here we go.
I had to address it. I mean, I didn't think you would have known a song from them.
I mean, apparently I do. I know of them, and I know that song. I just didn't know that was them. So clearly my knowledge is greater than I thought it may be, which I wish would have been the case for NFL DFS week 2. But it was frustrating, I think is the way that I would say it, because, I mean, Najee Harris eventually got there. Do I feel good about it? No. But he got there. And then there was the Cowboys-Chargers game, which was awesome. There were a bunch of yards. They moved the ball up and down the field at will, but then penalties just ruined everything. Penalties, there was weird stuff in the red zone. So, I had a lot of that game. I had a lot of Dak and a lot of Herbert. And having that be the capper to the slate, I think just kind of made it frustrating, even though, I had enough Kyler where, that definitely helped. But, it was just kind of frustrating the way that worked. And then Derrick Henry just lighting things up. There we go again. It was the afternoon slate was fun, but I feel like I just wish I could have. I don't know. I wish that Cowboys Chargers game hadn't gone the way it had, because I feel like it would have made things go a lot smoother.
Yeah. The Derrick Henry thing it's just a good reminder of. And I know that we bucket him with Nick Chubb, but I think we also very much differentiate he and Nick Chubb, because Nick Chubb doesn't really have these 40-point games. But you need players in your lineups who can erase mistakes, as you like to put it. Derrick Henry can do that. Now, sometimes he can be the mistake to play, but that is why upside is so important. And that's the one thing that really stuck out to me is, we were both kind of tilting, why do we play Chris Carson? And he scored twice, and
I still hated myself for it.
But I understand there's a salary gap between guys like this, but it's just really important to keep in mind. Getting a 2-touchdown game from Chris Carson is very different, most likely, from a 2-touchdown game from someone like Derrick Henry or Alvin Kamara or Dalvin Cook or Christian McCaffrey. Because
I forgot about Alvin. Thanks for reminding me of Kamara. What happened there?
Yeah,
appreciate it.
So he was my snake draft first round pick. So the snake draft did not go well for me. Josh Allen looks completely. I don't want to say completely busted, but I think there's a lot that we need to figure out if it's real or not.
And we will start that off just a second by talking about the headliners. But first, hey, football fans, FanDuel's giving new users an exclusive offer to play NFL Daily Fantasy for free all season long. All you got to do is sign up if you have not yet for FanDuel Daily Fantasy. I know some of you are new listeners here. Welcome. If you've not signed up for FanDuel yet, make sure you do so. You'll receive one free voucher for each remaining week of the NFL season. You will receive your voucher upon sign up to the FanDuel app. Vouchers will automatically apply to each weekly entry. Head over to FanDuel.com and sign up to play Daily Fantasy Football today. Eligibility restrictions apply. New users only. Go to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app for more details. Also, a quick reminder, we do have a listener league back once again. Week 1 ran, so we will have week 2 ran. We'll have a week 3 listener league as well. Tune in on the Thursday preview podcast to get the URL for that. I'll put it pretty early in the podcast so you can know where to go. It's a $5 entry, 3 entries max. There is no rake, so you can go there and get yourself entered next week. Just a reminder to tune in on Thursday to get that link. Let's break down the headlines now of week number 1. The main headline here for week number 2, the main headline here, unfortunately, is the quarterbacking injuries, because quarterback just drives so much of how we view teams from a DFS perspective. When we see guys go down, there are like 4 different quarterbacking injuries we had to discuss. It is kind of where we have to start things. We'll talk about some happier stuff and the role changes with some receivers emerging. But first, let's start things off here with the quarterbacking injuries. With Andy Dalton, hurt his knee early against the Bears, or with the Bears against the Bengals, did not return. Justin Fields came in, didn't look great. 6 of 13 for 60 yards. He had a pick, negative 0.60 passing at expected points per dropback, but there were good things there. First of all, he was willing to throw downfield. Dalton was not. We know Fields is a good deep ball thrower. He ran the ball 10 times compared to 13 pass attempts. That's pretty crazy. So Brandon, I was listening to Ian Rappaport this morning, and it sounds like he is hinting as if Justin Fields will be starting in week number 3 against the Cleveland Browns. So let's just assume right now that's the case. How do we view this Bears team if we assume Justin Fields is the starter in week number 3?
I think the default is to say that it's better than with Andy Dalton, but the sheer number of rushing attempts he had compared to passes at least puts into question how hard we would be able to go at someone like Allen Robinson, who, as much as we love Allen Robinson, typically is more of a volume-based ceiling guy than a downfield threat. But we did see Fields at least throw deep, so at least 16 air yards downfield from the line of scrimmage on 3 of his 13 attempts. 2 of those went to Darnell Mooney. The other one went to Allen Robinson. Overall, Mooney had 4 targets from him. Robinson had 3, and Marquise Goodwin had 3. So if we at least know that he's going to fixate more on Mooney and Robinson, that helps. But the real question, I think, comes into the real question we have to ask is, what's their pass rate going to be, and how might that affect the overall offense? So I would want to be out ahead of the curve with Justin Fields. I don't think that's even possible, because everyone has just been waiting for him. But yeah. I think that if everyone is going to go hard at him, that the possible red flag here would just be he might run the ball a ton, and they might not throw the ball as much as we would hope for the stacks to hit.
I think that the way I'd view it is being more volatile, which is good. I think volatility is good. I should clarify that. Volatility is a good thing, because he could be what he was on Sunday, which is a guy who runs a lot, a guy who isn't super effective as a passer. The floor on that is pretty bad. But we saw Justin Fields in the preseason. We've heard buzz during training camp. We watched him obliterate Clemson in college. We know what this dude can do. So I feel like the range of outcomes just got a lot wider. It gets a lot wider if Fields starts, and that's a good thing. So if you're looking at that game between Chicago and Cleveland, it's a 46.5 point total. Like, that game could be 34 points, or it could be 57 points by the end. I think that's a good thing, because we talk a lot about trying to stack good at game environments. There is a situation in which this is one of the better game environments on the slate. That's not my default assumption, but there is a path to that. And I think that that's pretty valuable. And I would say that even if they do run more, and even if Fields is not as effective as we'd hope right away, I still think it's an upgrade for Mooney and Robinson, because Fields will go downfield, and we need downfield pass attempts for our wide receivers.
Yeah, we really do. And that's one thing that I've really learned from you the past few years is ADOT can help, air yards can help, but the sheer just downfield targets that guys are getting, that I ran the numbers. I don't remember the exact percentage off my head, but like downfield targets are more important. They're worth more than your average target, obviously. And so that's important. That's why I'm kind of high on Darnell Mooney moving forward. He actually led the team in routes this week.
Yeah. And we talked about Mooney a lot last year. I was not in on him, but that was because I didn't have faith in the guy throwing the football to connect downfield. Now you've got a guy who I've seen with my eyes have a great deep ball, and Mooney has a lot of speed. I think that adds up pretty well. So I would say that Mooney gets the biggest bump here of the guys.
Could you do like a rapid fire, name that salary for Fields, David Montgomery, Allen Robinson, and Darnell Mooney?
Fields 75, David Montgomery 77, Allen Robinson, I'll probably be lower than his actual salary on this, but probably like 7,000. And then Darnell Mooney, I would say, is 57. Those are all very much off the top of the head.
The Mooney's 56, so you're right on there. Robinson 7,000, so you were dead on. Montgomery is 6,900, which is very nice.
Okay,
so a lot lower than you expected. And then Justin Fields 6,500.
Oh,
so he could open things up a lot. For week 3,
65.
So is this what? Okay, so for anyone who hasn't tuned in yet to a recap show, which I guess this is our second, even though it's. We're doing a concluding section, notes to our future self, things we don't want to forget. Would you consider putting play Justin Fields in that?
No, because I feel like there are other good quarterbacks in that slate. So I don't think he's a must. I think that he is going to be in the player pool.
Yes. Okay.
Like if he starts $6,500, given the rushing, given the possibility, I think that game shoots out. I would also say it opens up Brown's defense again at $4,200. Like I think you want to have both situations covered, because again, it's a very volatile situation, which is good in this scenario.
Yeah.
So did you differ from me in any of the skill guys as far as where I thought the salary should be?
No, I was about on. I would have been a little bit lower on David Montgomery, just because I'm never putting David Montgomery up close to 8,000, just because of how I am. But yeah, next week with this, just looking at the schedule, we should have Russ, who else? Kyler, Mahomes, Lamar.
Yeah.
It's going to be.
So Montgomery had a really good role in week 2. I know it's because they were ahead, but like 79% snap rate, 44% of the red zone chances. He had 28 adjusted opportunities. He looked good in week 1, but got banged up. I think that Montgomery is undersalaried at that.
I would say that
too,
but
role. Yeah,
but I also wouldn't put him at 77. I'd
put him
more at 73 or 74.
So keep it close tab on that one, because if Fields starts, that's going to be a big headline for week number 3. Let's move now to the Dolphins. Tua Tagovailoa bruised his ribs and didn't return. Didn't look good. I thought worse than bruised ribs when he went down, because he was like kind of stumbling. It didn't look good. Yeah. Speaking of didn't look good, Jacoby Brissett came in that game negative 0.31 passing net expected points per dropback in that game. It kind of seems like expectation right now is that Tua will start in week number 3 against Las Vegas, but we've seen him once against New England, where I had some concerns on the way he looked in that game, and then he got hurt early against the Bills. So what's your vibe on this Miami offense heading out to Las Vegas in week number 3?
It's not great. Tua has taken a sack on 11.4% of his dropbacks, which is a top 4 rate, or I guess bottom 4 rate, however you'd want to look at that. But that's problematic. His ADOT's 7.9 yards, which is just league average. Not a whole lot of overall efficiency. I feel like Miami is an offense that I'm never going to worry about. And I posed this question in our Slack yesterday on Sunday, just thinking like, I gotta start thinking through like, what are the odds at 5 p.m. on a Sunday that I'm tilting like not using someone from a ceiling perspective, and there's nobody in this offense that I would just be like, I should have used them because their ceiling was so great. So this is one of those things where, yeah, we have quarterback injuries, but at a certain point, I think it just takes the offenses completely off the board. You know, Tua might play, but if he's banged up and has been struggling already, then that's just kind of hard to get behind.
Yeah. Right now, nobody in this offense is more than a 24% target share. Devonte Parker leads at 23%. Parker has 3 total deep targets. They didn't throw deep a lot in week 1, kind of as you alluded to at the low A dot. I think that like Parker and Waddle would be considerations, but like they're not. I agree where I'm not. There's not a lot of FOMO there. I think.
Yeah, I think it's probably the only chance that I'm getting there. It's if I love the other side of the game, and I'm just looking for bringbacks. But that's
you really might, because we'll talk about Derek Carr later.
Yeah,
bombs away, baby. Tyrod Taylor, bummer, suffered a hamstring injury. He's out at least this Thursday. He was just playing too well. Like, we didn't deserve Tyrod. Davis Mills took over and completed 8 of 18 passes. He averaged 0.09 passing net expected points per dropback, which seems wrong, but whatever. He was horrible in the preseason. He averaged negative 0.41 EPA per dropback according to Next Gen Stats. I know it's a single game slate, but like, I know you have to use one Texan in your lineup, but it's going to be really hard to find one with Davis Mills there starting on Thursday. I think the big takeaway here is I know Carolina's 7-point favorite. I wouldn't be shocked if that moves before the game. I think we're okay just writing off the entire Texans team, right?
I don't want to do that to my guy, Chris Conley. But yeah.
He had 2 targets, even though they threw a ton. I'm not trying to poo-poo your boy, but like
the one guy that I was going to get at,
he was tied for second in targets.
He was, because there was such a big gap. Brandon Cooks would be the obvious beneficiary here of. I don't even know, not really beneficiary, but I think he's. Let me see if I sort this the right way. 3rd in target share through 2 games, behind Cooper Kupp and Deebo Samuel among receivers. That's. Again, you're not going to want to go out of your way on a full slate to play Brandon Cooks in such a bad offense, but if we're talking single game, he's the guy who just has the clear role.
Yep, they're a cross-off team for sure. Once Tyrod gets back, we can talk about them because he looked really good again, and I think that was fun. But like, not with Davis Mills. Carson Wentz turned his ankle in the 4th quarter and did not return. Doesn't seem too bad, but like, they were in a high-impact situation, and Wentz couldn't really go. Jacob Eason did not look good. I'm not sure what the vibe is on Wentz. It sounds like it's not related to his foot injury from the preseason, but they're in an interesting game for week number 3. It seems like bookmakers are assuming Wentz will play because it is a 4.5-point spread in favor of Tennessee right now. What's your level of concern on this this Indianapolis offense, given we don't really know Wentz's health? Michael Pittman did kind of have a role in week 2.
Yeah, Pittman was someone I was keeping an eye on. I almost played him a bit in my own lineups, but I didn't quite get there in like Darrell Henderson bringbacks. But he's had a solid role. I just think that, and this is probably kind of us talking, we're not that high on Carson Wentz to begin with. So I don't know how much I would change based on his health. What's really appealing or interesting, I should at least say, is that game has a total of 50.5, which is one of 4 games that I'm counting on the main slate over 50. I don't think it'll stick there.
That's without the Chargers and the Chiefs posted yet. So that'll make it 5.
I thought they were on there.
They're not.
Oh, they're not. Okay.
No.
So I would expect that not to be at above 50. And even if it is, I don't think I'm going to chase that one. I just don't have a lot of interest in the Colts offense historically because of the target shares that they dole out. Michael Pittman's kind of the only receiver you could consider from a daily fantasy standpoint. Some other guys are relevant more for season long. And then there's obviously Jonathan Taylor, but I typically don't even get to Jonathan Taylor just because I prefer other offenses. So I'm still just kind of down on this offense regardless of Carson Wentz's health.
Yeah, Taylor did lose snaps again because they were in a negative script, which is, one thing we knew was possible. But the one positive for him is that he still had 44% of the team's red zone chances. So we saw last year where he'd lose work to Nyheim Hines in the red zone. It's not happening this year. So that's the one good thing for him. And I think that I'll probably have shares of that game in terms of game stacks, and both Pittman and Taylor work there. And let's see what the salary is for Pittman. It is $5,600. I think that's low enough where I can like be okay, but not like prioritizing, right?
Yeah, I think the wide receiver depth that we have in the NFL currently is putting a lot of capable receivers on the radar, but just by nature of you can't have every receiver above 6,000 with a role on FanDuel. So we're naturally going to get kind of I would assume like a rotating cast of receivers who haven't performed, for a week or two, dropping below 6,000 on FanDuel.
Yeah.
Pittman's probably just going to be part of that. So I think that's going to end up being a key for me on FanDuel just because of the state of the position.
Okay, so those are the quarterbacking injuries. Let's move now to the injury section of the podcast and talk about some of the non-quarterbacks who got hurt. Starting out with Jarvis Landry, hurt his MCL and seems like he's probably going to miss some time here. Baker Mayfield still averaged 0.20, passing that expected points per dropback without him, which, I mean, like they had a lot of time last year to work with like non-elite receivers, and Baker still played well. Austin Hooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones led with 17 routes run. Rashard Higgins had more of a full-time role of 15 routes. Nick Chubb and Anthony Schwartz both ran 13. David Njoku and Harrison Bryant ran 11. So it seems like they went with a lot of heavy formations with Njoku, Bryant, Hooper out there, which is good for Hooper, who lost some routes to Njoku last week. And seems like that was not as true this week. So Landry's probably going to sit. We don't know the status of Odell Beckham for this week. Where are you sitting with this Browns offense if we assume Jarvis is not going to go and we don't know about Odell Beckham?
So this is one of those spots where I would say just remember that NFL DFS is not NBA DFS.
Not every injury is the biggest thing to ever happen.
Yeah, and actually a lot of the times with NFL, if you take the best skill position players off the field, the offensive expectation drops a ton. If you're not moving the ball, you're not running plays, you're not, generating yards, you're not having touchdown chances. This isn't just like who can get the most targets per dollar in salary, like we might have with NBA. I'm not overly excited about the Browns as a 7.5 point favorite. They might just, they're going to want to run the ball. And I think that what we get, who led here in targets? Hooper with 5. And Jar was basically out the whole game. So
yeah, and Hooper is $5,300. Not even like a super low salary tight end. Like he's
what's
up there.
I guess what's Peoples-Jones?
So he's $5,500, and he got a lot of good buzz during camp, and he played well at times last year. But like he's had a good role both games and has 2 total targets.
Yeah,
like that's because I want to like him.
He's running some wind sprints out there.
He's he's looking good doing them. He's a great athlete, but like. It's kind of annoying. Like Anthony Schwartz just doesn't he's kind of banged up. 5 targets in week 1. And
what he does is speed.
Right. 3 of them were downfield. Yeah. Congrats on the we gotta keep this receiver over 55 miles per hour. But like I think that with him, it's just like, is there a situation where Donovan Peoples-Jones or Anthony Schwartz gets me 7 targets? That's that. I don't know. I don't think so.
So they had 7 guys in week 2 run between 48% and 74% of routes. So between 11 and 17. That's a hefty number of players to be giving like middling workloads.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to say this isn't like if we had like an 8-man rotation in NBA, it'd be like, yeah, play all these guys, but it just doesn't work that way, and I don't really see the path to big games from these receivers if they're all getting kind of equal opportunities overall.
Yeah, it's tough. I think you can take swipes, but you can't have any confidence in any of these guys, and I'd rather have confidence in my dudes personally. No update yet in Deontay Johnson, who seemed to hurt his knee at the end of the game. It was literally like a worthless play. They were down, I think, by 2 scores, and there was nothing to be gained there. Hurt his knee, but no update yet. Chase Claypool had 5 deep targets in the game. Problem is that the offense sucks, and they can't afford to lose good players. I know people have gripes about Deontay Johnson's hands, but he's a good football player. If you take him out of this offense, that's going to be rough. Defense may be without TJ Watt. That matters a lot for the opposing teams. TJ Watt hurt his groin. That's a concern there, but like the Steelers are already bad, and now maybe no Deontay Johnson. They're facing Cincinnati next week. Like Cincinnati didn't look Cincinnati's defense isn't like elite by any means, but like, I don't know. I feel like maybe you go at Claypool, but like, I think the overall expectation for this offense goes down. It hurts Najee Harris once again, too.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a similar thing that we just talked about with the Browns. You take good players out of an offense, it opens up opportunity, but those opportunities are tied to, more more plays in the middle of the field, fewer plays down in the red zone. And I think the real key that kind of jumped out to me just now, the more that I think about it, is that probably puts more of an emphasis on those downfield targets, because if you're kind of guaranteeing fewer red zone trips for your team, you don't be looking at like red zone target. You wouldn't be looking at the downfield targets, the guys who are getting those better opportunities. So I would say that downgrades Najee Harris, unfortunately, and would put me highest on Claypool of anyone, because we know Juju's not really going to be too much of a downfield threat. So
no. With Najee, he has had 49 total yards and 81 so far. That's bad. 22 and 20 adjusted opportunities. That's not great. He needed like a sick play just to score in week number 2. Does get a lot of red zone work. He had 50% of the red zone chances this week, 57% last week. So like, that's good, but like, name that salary Najee Harris now that we have 2 weeks to sample on this offense just being wretched.
He's got to be someone like in that 67 range, I think, because the workload's still good, but the offense is not.
I think he's 2019 Leonard Fournette. Like that's kind of what it is, where he gets amazing work, but like the offense, that was more Fournette maybe not being great than like the offense. This is, I think, more the offense than Najee.
So what would you say for his salary?
I think 67's right.
Because he's 75. That's a lot. Now, I know we're looking for guys who just have snaps, have a role, but that's tough, especially whenever we were just basically praying that he got bailed out with a touchdown yesterday. And we're not really here to say like, oh, he had 45 and 38 rushing yards, that's what he's going to do the rest of the year. But there are, with all of this context, with the offensive line, with Deontay banged up, he might get more targets, sure. He had 5 targets and 3 targets in week 1. But again, if you're not moving the ball efficiently, you need to break a long run. And like, he had that stiff arm, and I think people will take note of that. But that's a steep salary to be asking for in this offense.
All right. Would you rather Joe Mixon or Najee Harris in that game?
Joe Mixon.
By a wide margin, right?
Yeah.
I agree. We've officially flipped on poor Najee. Again, not his fault. This is not him.
And
Mixon's 67. That's why I asked, because I was like, my eyes lit up, because that's wild.
Like, I know it's not a great rushing matchup for Mixon, but
I don't care. For 67, put him up against like the 70s Vikings, purple people eaters, and let's ride, baby. All the 49ers backs except Trenton Cannon got hurt. Trey Sermon has a concussion. Elijah Mitchell had a shoulder injury. He came back in, but like, he's not fully healthy. Jermichael Hasty has an ankle injury. Cannon is typically a special teamer, but he has speed. Talked about this on Thursday, the Monday night preview, when he was with the Ravens. I was talking with Ryan Williams about how Trenton Cannon in Madden with the Jets back in like 2015 was amazing, because he just had speed. You could just like plug him in, do whatever. But he's simply a special teamer. So he does actually fit what they tend to do, like Raheem Mostert is a fast former special teamer. Trenton Cannon is that too. But like, it seemed like Mitchell had a good role before the injury. I just don't know what to think about this backfield, given the lack of knowledge we have right now.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to project this early what happens. I think the real hypotheticals are, because Eli Mitchell did come back.
Mm-hmm.
I think the 2 hypotheticals you have to ask are, if Mitchell plays, where are we with this backfield? And if it's like just Trenton Cannon, where are we with the backfield? But they'll bring I don't know. It feels like they still have 7 running backs on their roster, because they feel like they have every running back in the league.
Yeah, they They do. So we'll see how it plays out there. I think that's one we just kind of need more info on.
Yeah.
Let's move now to Darrell Henderson. Amazing role, but then got hurt, injured his ribs against the Colts. I think he might have played every snap before then. I know Jake Funk got in. It might have been for like 1 or 2 snaps before Henderson got hurt. But Sony Michel played 16 of 19 snaps after Henderson's injury, 10 carries and no targets. And like, that's a good role. I mean, it's an okay role. The problem is they're facing the Bucs next week. And the one thing, I mean, Bucs do a lot of stuff well, but the thing they do like amazing on defense is stop the run. So let's assume that there's no Henderson and we're in this matchup here at the Bucs. Name that salary for Sony Michel in week number 3.
I'm probably gonna be low, but I'm baking in the matchup and the fact that Michel has not been a factor. And before I even say this, you said Jake Funk played 3 snaps. He did. I tried to count these up. I think there were 19 offensive plays for the Rams after Darrell Henderson's injury. I have Michel with 16 snaps and Funk with 3 total snaps for the game. I didn't count up Jake Funk snaps, but that makes sense that
you weren't grinding Jake Funk tape.
No. So like Henderson might literally have played every snap before that. And if it took an injury to Darrell Henderson to get Sony Michel out there, that's telling. So that plus the matchup, I'm going to be low on this, but I'd probably say like 6,200.
I was thinking 65, so we're not that far off. Like it's just, I think there are just a lot of question marks. He's 57, so like that's low enough to be in play. Because like there is a situation where he does get some passing game work, maybe.
So yeah, Sony Michel is going to be like the point per dollar guy who makes a lot.
He'll be the
lineups.
Elijah Mitchell of week 3.
Yeah, he's going to make the optimizer lineups. Like love him. And so that you can get up to the stud receivers with like DeAndre Hopkins at probably 9,000 or whatever he's going to be at.
Rondale Moore at 10,000.
1,000 in salary for every route he runs.
Yep, exactly.
So I'm probably...
I want to hear what McVay says. McVay is full of poop sometimes, but the way he phrases things can be telling if you read into it. Like, this week, someone asked him, like, will Sony Michel get a bigger workload? And he said, I don't know. And like that was true. So don't take his words at face value, but read into what he's saying and try to get a vibe on the sentiment around Michel and then go from there. But it's just going to be early down work against that defense. That's tough, even though I'm going to stack the daylights out of that game, most likely. So keep that in mind. Let's move now to role changes and talk about happier things. We saw some good wide receivers get good usage in week number 2, and a lot of them are like mid-range guys, not like the typical stud wide receivers. One of them is a previous stud wide receiver who is back. Good to see him healthy again, given the camp reports. That is Cortland Sutton. Was outstanding in week 2 from a usage perspective. He had 12 targets. Nobody else had more than 6. He had 5 deep targets, 260 air yards. Cortland Sutton was getting work. Teddy Bridgewater's playing well. Teddy Bridgewater revenge game incoming against the Jets. Thoughts on Cortland Sutton here?
Yeah, I thought about that. I feel like Teddy's going to have a ton of revenge games coming up.
Do they play the Saints this year? I really need him to. I think that'd be great.
Just feels like he's been with enough teams now where he's going to be like, you know,
the Ryan Fitzpatrick
revenge game every third week is going to be a revenge game for him.
I'm into it.
But yeah, Sutton, someone that we liked a lot last year, mostly because he is just a phenomenal receiver. You alluded to the camp reports where it seemed like he was maybe not mentally ready to return after his injury. I think that hopefully he's overcome that. But the 5 downfield targets tied him for a week lead with Chase Claypool, as you mentioned, but also Mike Evans. That's good company to keep. And I put together a little model, just kind of predict, expected fantasy points based on underlying data. So it doesn't even really factor in anything that you actually did. Yeah. And he led the week. So it's basically a way to say that he had the best kind of overall workload among receivers in week 2. So I don't really think you can talk poorly about that.
Yeah. I think if I had to float a comp out there, he's going to be Allen Robinson-esque, where he's not in games we want to stack, but the workload is amazing. That's kind of the one downside is I don't know how often I'll want to stack Broncos games just because like their defense is pretty good and they're not going to be in a lot of super high scoring affairs I wouldn't expect.
Yeah, I think, I mean, stylistically, not quite, just because of the downfield targets. I think
Robinson gets downfield work.
Sure, but I don't know. I'm sure Allen Robinson has like a 16 target, 260 air yard game, but they're probably fewer than Sutton's. But
yeah.
So yeah, that's a good comp, I think, like in terms of how we would think of them. Although I would assume Cortland Sutton probably never going to be as high salaried as Allen Robinson, but I could be wrong in that.
Name that salary for Cortland Sutton week 3, considering that it's a game where they're heavily favored against a bad team.
So that's going to bog things down. How does 68 sound?
Appropriate. Okay. That's around the A-Rob zone. And Sutton is scrolling $6,900.
Okay.
Nice. About appropriate. Yeah. I think
it's a 41.5 point total. That's rough.
That might be high. That might be high. We'll see. Zach Wilson was not as bad as perception on Sunday. He made some really idiotic throws, but like people took it a little too far. Like Corey Davis should have had one of those picks, but whatever. Rondale Moore, we joked about it before, like not running a lot of routes, but like who cares? He leads the Cardinals in target share through 2 weeks over DeAndre Hopkins, 19.7%, which is not great, but like he ran a route on 22 of 39 dropbacks, which is 56%, but led the team with 8 targets. He had a better role in week 2 than he had in week 1. I would say it's really hard to keep talented guys off the field for too long. And whether that is at the expense of AJ Green or Christian Kirk, I don't know. AJ Green kind of dusted the Vikings on the play, which was really embarrassing. I feel like we should be okay with Rondale Moore, even though the routes are bad. Is that begging for death and destruction? Is that what I'm asking for here?
Yeah, this is a really interesting conversation because everybody knows what Rondale Moore did in week 2 and even in week 1. Like it was a really strong production-based week 1, all things considered, for a rookie. But he's run 36 routes total. I think if you look at the other top 4, Christian Kirk's run 50. So like there's a pretty massive gap between he and the next guy in that top 4. But he leads, as you mentioned, in target share, and he's gotten a target on 36% of his routes run. That rate trails only Deebo Samuel at 42% and Cooper Kupp at 37% among relevant receivers. So it's one thing to have like the volume of routes be the issue, but he's getting work on those routes, which really helps. But I don't know if like he's getting volume because he was like wide open on his big touchdown. Like,
yeah, that was a broken coverage. Yeah.
So like, if there comes a week where he still runs the 4th most routes, is basically running half the routes of the other guys, doesn't convert on these big plays, maybe doesn't even get targeted at this outlier rate, he's gonna bust. And so it's like I can see both sides of it where but he's getting work. He's probably getting more acclimated. He's probably going to keep that role and get targeted when he's out there. But then there's the flip side of like he's just not running a whole lot of routes. And if he's not hyper efficient, he has no real path to like production.
Do you want to guess Rondale Moore's average yards of separation per target per next gen stats?
It's probably like 8.
It's 7.8. I think you were exaggerating. You were almost right. So I think that with this situation, you never want to assume the way coaches will play things because like coaches, that'll lose you all a lot of money.
Yes.
So much money.
Yes.
However, at a certain point, like so I think the encouraging thing too is they were getting the ball they are trying to get the ball in his hands. And that to me says that even if the route number stays low, the targets per route run number is going to be not outlierish, maybe, but it's going to be high. So even if it does come down, I think it'll still be elevated. So if those routes go up and that number stays high, that to me is pretty encouraging. So name that salary for Rondale Moore, all things considered, in week 3 at Jacksonville.
So I ended up seeing it, full transparency. Okay. Just because I wanted to throw it to you, because I think I made my case and then you were making your case. So you name that salary first.
$5,800.
He's 56.
Perfect. I'll take it. Like that's not.
Do you think that's appropriate, or do you think that's too low?
It's appropriate.
Okay.
I think so. Like I think people will probably be a bit more excited about him than they should be in week 3, given the volatility. But like, I would still say that even if we go in with no additional information on what his role will be, he is still someone worthy of exposure. Like we talked about, will I regret not using this guy? There is a good chance I regret not using Rondale Moore in week 3 if I don't use him.
Yeah, but I can also see
I can regret using him. Sure.
I can regret using him, and he gets 15 routes and just the 4 targets and doesn't have the 80-yard touchdown.
Yeah.
So he's going to be fascinating. I think we'll probably end up talking more about him specifically on Thursday.
Just need Jacksonville to score to do literally anything in that game, which is not a guarantee. Let's talk about the Rams here because Matthew Stafford is slinging it, looking really good. And most of that slanging it's going to Cooper Kupp. He has 37% of the team's targets, or 38% overall through the first 2 weeks. He has 30% of the deep targets, and I think 40% in the red zone. I just had these numbers. Pull them up here. Why don't I just actually look at the numbers? Okay, so 38% overall, 33% deep, 40% in the red zone. Matthew Stafford balling out. Cooper Kupp's been awesome, and Robert Woods is kind of getting outrun by Van Jefferson, which is weird. I know that the targets favor Woods by a pretty decent amount, but I would say level of concern on Woods is decent.
He's the AJ Green.
Woof.
He's the AJ Green in this conversation.
Woof. Level of adoration for Cooper Kupp skyrocketing. As you know, Pooper is not my favorite guy, but I'm into it now. I'm finally on Team Cooper Kupp. I've been broken.
Yeah, I mean the 37% target share in week 2, 39% in week 1. And the thing I think for us with Kupp is that he historically has not gotten a whole lot of downfield work. His 8 outs still 8 yards.
He also fumbles and ruins Jared Goff's expected points numbers, but that's different.
He had a downfield target in week 1. A different source actually had 2 downfield targets for him in week 1 as well, but had 2 in week 2 and a touchdown each week on those downfield looks, which, yes, it says regression, but I'm okay going with the guy getting some downfield work. That's just a big difference for me. So I was not as high as I should have been because I love the role with Kupp. The $6,200 salary was phenomenal. I just was like, well, he's still Cooper Kupp, not going to get a whole lot of downfield work. And that's changing. So that is what is driving my differentiation this year on Kupp.
Yeah. And I liked him. I just wasn't in that range very much, which is like, it's a bad excuse. Like that's bad. If you like someone that much, you should prioritize them. And I didn't. That was a mistake on my part. Didn't have enough. I had some, but not enough for sure. With Cooper Kupp, name that salary for Cooper Kupp in week number 3.
He's gonna have like the biggest jump. Who do they play and what's the over under?
They play the Bucks in one of the best games in the slate.
Yeah, that's right. He's gonna be like 75 probably.
He is 79. But it's appropriate. Given his target share, that's fine.
Yeah. Boy, they're going to throw. So they're top 3 in just percent of their plays that are downfield passes.
Yeah.
That's going to be a pass-heavy game.
Oh, yeah. I'm into it. Very into it. What are your thoughts on Robert Woods and Tyler Higby? Higby I used a lot of on Sunday, and it did not go well.
Yeah. His target share dropped from 23% to 3% in week 2. I'm probably just not. I don't know. I don't think I have to go. So I guess the issue is if they weren't in this game next week, I wouldn't really even have much interest in Robert Woods, but I'm going to have interest because everyone is most likely going to be down on Robert Woods after what he's put forth. So I should probably be open to the idea of some Woods. He's got a 10.8 ADOT, 2 downfield targets per game. Is that per game? Yeah, per game. He's got more air yards per game than Kupp. I think maybe Woods is just kind of gonna get like forgotten about.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Kupp's at 18.7 expected receiving fantasy points per game. Woods is at 14.8, and their gap in actual FanDuel points per game is a cavern. So
with the $6,100. So
I'm
be
probably
there.
gonna have a lot of Robert Woods.
I don't want to, but I will too.
Yeah.
It's disappointing. Tyler Higby, he didn't do anything, which is annoying, and it does hurt to go back to someone who just literally like took a cinder block to like wherever is most painful on you, and that sucks. But he ran a route on 26 of 31 dropbacks, and he played every single snap once again. I think he did that last week as well. Higby's $5,500. I think that Tyler Higby is a cash game consideration at that salary, despite the fact he had one target this past week.
Sure. I mean, tight end, we're going to have Kelsey on the slate.
Gronk, who is basically Kelsey.
Yeah. Darren Waller will be back on the slate. It's I don't know. It's honestly, I mean, I know Darren Waller wasn't great this week, but it's really scary.
He's great. Yeah, no, he's great.
It's scary at this point to avoid the elite tight ends and the elite quarterbacks because they're separating from the rest of their positions.
Mm-hmm. I do think Higby has a role good enough to get there, though. So I'd say that.
To get you, 11?
No. He plays every snap in a good offense in the game we want to stack. Come on. Deebo Samuel cementing himself as a target monster for the 49ers through 2 games, 39% of the targets. He's averaging 10 targets per game. If you're concerned about the run-heavy nature, he's getting targets. George Kittle is second at 18%, which is 4.5 per game. Deebo, just 2 deep targets, but he's shown yardage upside still because he's amazing. So I know that like it's not the best rule, but like it's pretty good still. Brandon Ayuk did have a little bit more life in week number 3 or 2. He ran around on 18 to 30 dropbacks, still just 2 targets. I think it's kind of Deebo's show until we hear different, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's very clear. He's got 54% of the team's air yards, which is 72 per game, which isn't phenomenal. But we know he's got run after the catch ability. And honestly, if you give Deebo anything that is at the line of scrimmage, that's good for Deebo. But anything beyond that is just a big plus. So yeah, I'm totally fine with it. Also,
high key might get some more rushing attempts this week because of all the running back injuries.
Very, very true. So Deebo could be kind of a bit of a cheat code this week. But before I forget, Robert Woods, 3 total deep targets, 1.5 per game. I had it sorted to week 2, not both weeks. I just wanted to clarify before.
Scrub.
Yeah.
Terry McLaurin seems to be a favorite of Taylor Heineke. He had 14 targets on Thursday, which gives him a 28% target share this year. Heineke's at 0.09 passing net expected points per drop back this year, 0.10 last year. So I think that's probably about where we should expect him. Not super aggressive thus far has been Heineke, but the other thing is there's some slight concerns around the high leverage looks because McLaurin has just 2 deep targets and 1 in the red zone so far this year. But I think that he's kind of reestablished himself as being a target hog for this team. Facing Buffalo next week, what's your thoughts on Terry McLaurin for that game?
Like him, the 2 deep targets in week 2. I'm really just looking at his week 2 stuff here. 110 air yards, 14 targets. McLaurin is one of those guys who both has a path to a ceiling from volume, but also big playability, and that is super valuable to me. So he's going to be someone that I do like the rest of the year if he's going to get peppered like this. Yeah. But even if that workload gets scaled back for some reason, I think the high leverage looks are good enough for me. Had an end zone target, red zone target, 2 deep on Thursday.
Logan Thomas revenge game next week for that one. I don't really have a ton of interest because he's kind of, the role's been okay this year, but just noting that needs to be noted that it's a revenge game for Logan Thomas. Mike Williams didn't get a role change, but solidified what he did in week number 1. He had 10 targets compared to Keenan Allen's 8. And if you look at their shares this year, their overall targets, deep targets, and red zone targets, they are almost clones. I am going to view them as a 1A, 1B situation, a DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett situation where they are both really good. And although there are 2 guys getting work in the same offense, I don't care. Let's use them both. Why not? So I think they're a 1A, 1B going forward. What are your thoughts on Big Mike after week 2?
I was thinking of it more of not necessarily play style wise.
Thielen, Jefferson, or
no?
Sorry.
The one that came to mind for me, because I think there's a clear gap, although it probably could have worked for Thielen and Jefferson, was last year for A.J. Brown and Corey Davis.
Okay.
Where you would still prioritize the A.J. Brown in that, which I think is Keenan Allen, but their workloads being identical. And again, Corey Davis being capable last year, Mike Williams definitely being capable this year. So it's going to be one of those where, like, I still want, I'm going to prefer Keenan Allen every week. Like, so I wouldn't say quite 1A, 1B, but Mike Williams is the number 2 here for me, but it's a lot closer than it was. So I think you and I just both loved him for a while now.
He's great. He gets the kind of targets we want, baby. And he's converting, and then they get called back by penalty because it's the Chargers. Name that salary for Mike Williams in week number 3 versus Kansas City in a game that we are going to stack the poop out of.
That's going to be like a 68 probably.
He is 6,000? What?
Okay, so all right, let me scroll ahead to notes to myself. Play
well, Keenan 69 though, so like just use both. Porque no los dos. It offsets.
What's Eckler?
It offsets Tyreek and Kelsey a bit. Like
Eckler 7,000 still.
What?
And Austin Eckler. Okay, got one of my notes to remember for next week.
Have you ever played for the Chargers? If yes, I will use you in week number 3. That is the checklist.
What's Herbert?
Like 63 apparently.
7,500. He went down, I think 100. People love Justin Herbert. I found that out on Twitter.
Did you
people
badmouth him? Did you badmouth him or what?
No, I would never do that. But people are like, I saw a tweet that was like, name the number of quarterbacks you take over Herbert over the next 10 years.
Okay, so Jared Goff, Tyrod Taylor, Baker Mayfield, Tua Tagovailoa.
Well, the answer was 0 for that was getting, and I was like,
oh,
that seems.
Well, who are you talking to? Because I have a log. Like, we're Baker way too fast here.
I don't. I think it was like a legit NFL writer, and I was astonished because there's at least one guy. I mean, yeah, like even if you nitpick everyone else, like I don't know.
I take Dak too, but whatever. That's not a anti-Herbert thing. It's a pro-Dak thing because Dak's great.
Right.
Speaking of your quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson was peppering Marquise Brown in week number 2. Can I introduce you in some Hollywood? Marquise Brown led with 10 targets last night. 4 of those were deep. 2 were in the red zone. If we look at the first 2 games, Marquise Brown, 30% target share, 63% of the deep targets and half of the red zone targets. It's small samples.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. Sammy Watkins at 28% overall. Mark Andrews at 19%. So this is a 2-part question. Are you finally in on Marquise Brown? And where are you at in Sammy Watkins and Mark Andrews? Because Mark Andrews, no high leverage targets yet. Not a ton of work overall. Little uncomfy with him. What are your thoughts here in the Ravens passing game?
Yeah, so I was going to throw these guys in the situations to monitor, but I have Marquise Brown with at least a 20% target share in both games, and the same for Sammy Watkins. Obviously, Brown, the bigger target share in week 2, just barely made that cutoff in week 1. Watkins been around 27%, but I think the thing that stands out for me is I've historically been down on Marquise Brown just from a sheer volume standpoint, but if he's going to get those like jump passes and just be the clear number 1 here, or at least the very obvious 1A over like a Sammy Watkins, that changes things. That also puts Lamar Jackson into even more viability for me from a DFS perspective, because Lamar's one of the guys that you can justify playing in a naked stack, so not really stacking him with a receiver. But if you can give me Marquise Brown or even Sammy Watkins, if he can stay healthy and relevant, that's going to bump up Lamar Jackson for me. As for Mark Andrews, I'm not really there. His receiving role, I mean, he's averaging 5.9 FanDuel points per game. He should have 6.5, so a slight underperformance there, but like not a whole lot to be that concerned about.
Yeah, and the reason that number is low is because he's not getting the kinds of targets that jack up that number fast.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I think that's what makes it really concerning for me. And maybe that's just a small sample because they faced Tyrann Mathieu, like that can jack some things up for sure. But like, I'm a little concerned. But they're playing Detroit next week. That could be a good get right spot for Mark Andrews. Not a game we'll probably want to stack, despite the fact the Ravens have some injuries and Jared Goff is the best quarterback on the planet. But I think that it might be a good situation to get more data on Andrews and then see how we apply that when he's on in games that we find more attractive.
What would his salary need to be for you to want to kind of build around him?
So if I go based on the role he has had so far this year, I think that he's like a $5,800 tight end.
So he's 6,000. So it's not that far off, but yeah. I'm not going to go out of my way to be building around Mark Andrews.
Higby or Mark Andrews?
I guess Higby at this point, just for the salary.
I agree. So this is not a receiver role change. We do have to talk about it in role changes because, my goodness, Derrick Henry is going to catch passes this year. We should have talked about this last week. I messed up. He had 6 targets this week, which is the most of his entire career. That the 4 targets he had last week were tied for the 4th most of his career. I kind of noticed it, but didn't make note of it, and I should have. Mm-hmm. 47 adjusted opportunities, which is carries plus 2x targets this week. Nobody else had more than 36. That is inflated by overtime. However, my goodness, did they go to OT? They did, yeah. So they're at home against the Colts. Name that salary for Derrick Henry in week number 3.
He's gonna be at least 9,400. I feel like.
But what would you put him at?
I would want to put him at being honest, I would go 9,000.
Yeah, I think 88, 9,000, somewhere in there is appropriate. He is $9,700. I still think that you should use him at that number. But there's no Christian McCaffrey on this slate. I don't think he needs to be a 50% type guy at that number, which is helpful.
Sure,
that does lower. Dalvin Cook at 95, I think is I like that game a bit more against Seattle. So that does help too, but Henry's role is sick right now.
Yeah. And or at least I don't want to say we in this situation, just have been more hesitant on Henry. And I mean, I think even more encouraging than the receiving is that he's done this before Thanksgiving.
He cares, he's trying before Thanksgiving. It's weird. What's going on?
I mean, I want to see how this affects his pre-Thanksgiving splits and why nobody's talking about it.
Yeah, not November yet. It sounds like there's some turkey outside or something like that. So anyway, we'll see with Derrick Henry. But I feel like even though 97 is a lot, his role justifies that right now. Let's finish up with some situations to monitor. Starting off with you, which situations do you have your eye on based on week 2 usage and more?
So some of these we ended up covering anyway, but just some quick. This is just kind of our quick segment here. Mm-hmm. Darnell Mooney led the Bears in routes in week 2, which I thought was interesting. Michael Pittman Jr. had a 33% target share in week 2, up to 22% on the season. You and I historically just track how infrequently Colts receivers get a 20% target share in a game. So
we've had bets on it before.
Yeah. So he might be the only non-Jonathan Taylor Colt I would consider in DFS in quite some time. Speaking of Taylor, just a 46% snap rate and negative script, but as you pointed out, had a good red zone role. I don't like paying heavy salary for running backs who get phased out in negative script. One thing that I find interesting, there are 19 receivers who had at least a 20% target share in both games. I took off some of the most obvious names because we don't need to talk about them, but some lower salaried or at least maybe unexpected receivers who, again, had a 20% target share in week 1 and 2. So kind of had a good role both weeks, just because the short samples can really be fluky with overall target share right now. But Brandon Cooks, Marquise Brown, and Sammy Watkins, as we mentioned, Sterling Shepard, Deontay Johnson, hope you're healthy. Devontae Smith, tons of air yards, had an elite ADOT.
Air yards don't pay the bills. I had 39%.
I know. But still a great role despite what happened this week.
I don't feel better about it. I feel better about the process. Don't feel better about the results. Does not help pay the bills.
Obviously Debo, but I think entering the season, that would have been surprising that his role's been so consistent both weeks. Mike Williams, Devonte Parker, which isn't going to be enough for me to go there if Tua's banged up, and Jacoby Myers.
How many targets would Jacoby Myers need to get 100 yards? Like over under 16, given that Mac Jones' ADOT is like 3.
Probably a push there.
Okay, cool. Any other ones standing out to you? Because I think we talked about most of those receivers. Anything else you're looking at here?
Just quickly, Austin Eckler, 24 routes in week 1, 0 targets. 24 routes in week 2, 9 targets. So
you said 7,000 is his salary?
Yes.
I'm going to have a lot of Austin Eckler again.
Yeah.
He paid off again with no touchdowns. It was 2020 Austin Eckler all over again. We're like, touchdowns are awesome. I love running backs who can pay off without them. I think it's amazing. He left a bit to get checked for a concussion, came back in after that, which means he's good to go. Did get taped up a bit on the sideline too. It looked like his ankle or his foot was getting taped up. But this week he had 1 of 9 red zone chances. I think a couple of those came while he was out of the game. But last week, 7 of 23. They ran 23 snaps in the red zone last week. That's absurd. But I think that Eckler is more of like a $7,800 back, given the role that he has. If we account for the fact there might still be some touchdown concerns there.
Yeah. I agree with that. 2 other names I had jotted down just because I thought they had interesting roles for different reasons. Antonio Gibson, his third down role went from his target share went from 24% to 4% in week 2 with basically a new with a new quarterback. And then Saquon Barkley played 83% of snaps on that Thursday night game, which is relevant. And I want to ask you, Barkley plays the Falcons and Gibson plays at the Bills. What would you put their salaries at?
So for Saquon, the Falcons are pretty good against the rush. I think that is worth noting.
Yeah, 83% of the snaps after 48% in week 1.
27 routes run.
Yeah.
That was a 4-day rest between games.
13 rushes, 3 targets.
He ran really well. Like he had that big breakaway.
Yeah.
I think Saquon's back to this is going to sound low.
No,
but
go ahead.
Uh-oh, is it really low?
Go ahead.
I was going to say 76.
He's 6,000.
Oh my god.
So, yeah. So
what?
Yeah.
What?
83%. And the reason I was going to mention it, I was like, yeah, Saquon's going to be 7,500, but he's playing 83% of the snaps, and we know how good he is. And coming off the Derrick Henry thing, it's like, Saquon's not going to have quite that kind of game, but at his peak, he could be the best running back in football. A $6,000 salary is, and again, with the 3 targets, 27 routes, as you mentioned, playing on that short week.
He had 56% of the red zone chances in week 2.
Play Saquon Barkley.
Wait, so who do we have so far? We have Saquon. You is every person who has ever thought of playing for the Chargers. Yeah, okay, cool.
Okay.
Wow. Antonio Gibson, his role is the same as it was. Like we knew those concerns, they're still there.
Okay.
So I would say he's more of like a 68 type guy.
61.
Man.
So yeah, I made for anyone watching the video, I've been kind of making some faces and doing some poses because I was perplexed. But I mean, I think
I'm surprised Alvin Kamara is not like $3,000 after what happened this past week.
I was like arrow up on Saquon, arrow down a bit on Gibson, but with their salaries right around 6,000, I mean.
Okay, so let's look at Antonio
I'm glad
Gibson.
you asked me to go over the other notes I had because I was going to skip over these things just because we're an hour in already. But
Gibson still had 108 yards from scrimmage in week 1, 73 in week 2. He had 30 adjusted opportunities in week 1. Like, even though he's flawed, I still think that like there's enough there to feel good about it. At 61, I'd prefer Saquon, but like,
yeah. But
even though Saquon again does have a team that's decent against the rush, but still, who cares? Oh, buddy.
Yeah. So I hit the absolute lock button on Najee Harris at 6,100. I might do the same on Saquon for week 3.
And Danny Sachs didn't play terribly on Thursday, so like, that helps too. They get an extra long week of rest. What could go wrong? My things to monitor for this week: Tony Pollard, really effective on Sunday. I think he seemed to gain some more work in this backfield. Zeke had 20 adjusted opportunities. Pollard had 19. Pollard just played 35% of the snaps, and Zeke played 72%, but they're both effective. Pollard was more explosive. Zeke had a high success rate type game. Zeke also had 3 of 8 red zone chances. Pollard got just 1. So I would say that Zeke is not off the radar. I would say that this does put a dent in his floor, and it does put a dent in his upside, but still something we can consider here. And then as far as Pollard goes, I don't want to go there yet, but he's one of those guys where it's Rondale Moore-esque, where if the role expands, it's really interesting. What are your thoughts on the Cowboys backfield?
Yeah, I'm not going to be as low on Zeke as most people were, even entering week 2. The snaps are still there. It's just it's a spot where Tony Pollard both is good, and when he's on the field, he's getting work. So it feels like his role is much, much bigger than it is. So I'm not to the point where I can play Pollard by any means. If you're not playing a majority of the snaps, you're not in the conversation for me. But I'm also not out on Zeke. Now, they do play Monday night, so it's a single game conversation, but
it can expand our sample, kind of like with Mark Andrews, where he's on the main slate, but I want to get more information here.
Right.
And I think that's good for the Cowboys. Mecole Hardman had decent usage in week 2. He had 8 targets. 4 of those were deep. Tyreek Hill seemed to be a focal point for the Ravens defense, but Hardman, I think, has a different role now than he had previously. He's on the field a lot more than he was before. So I think you more so than me have been more hesitant on Mecole Hardman, using guys like Demarcus Robinson, who's never got a downfield target except for the touchdown he had on last night. But that's a game we want to stack. Will you include Mecole Hardman in those game stacks?
Yeah, I mean, I talked in week 1 about trying to limit my exposure to wide receiver 3s, and I think you kind of just say you could probably call him the wide receiver 3 behind Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. But with the downfield work in this offense, it's a little bit different. So I'm good with Hardman, but I just don't like that you besmirched Demarcus Robinson either.
I didn't. Sorry, he hasn't. So he had 172 yards in week 1 or week 2 in 2019. He has not come within 100 yards of that since. No. We don't have a note on CEH, but he's dead to us, right? We don't need to ever use CEH ever again.
Yeah, I really didn't anyway, just because of how what his role has been.
Okay, cool.
So yeah,
just want to make sure because they got a pretty good rushing match next week, and I just want to make sure I can cross them off. We are always looking for tight ends of the pulse. So Pat Fryermuth, I think getting Fryermuth. Thank you. I looked at 16 YouTube videos during draft season.
I've heard Fryermuth. I've heard them all.
Within the same highlight package, the same game, I heard different pronunciations. Yeah. We'll go Fryermuth.
I was nodding because I love him.
Okay. Yeah. His week 2 is noteworthy because he ran around on more than half the team's dropbacks after being around 32% last week. Finished with 4 targets. The Steelers offense is bad enough where I'm not going to use Fryermuth yet, but we need tight ends who will do something. I think he's worth monitoring. Are you higher on him than that or no?
I'm never really high on value tight ends just because they can really sink a lineup unless they are well within the 4,000 range. But I just want to mention that Fryermuth was a really good tight end prospect in my model. Just kind of forgotten about because of Kyle Pitts this year, but he's great.
Penn State bias from your year and a half there. Just bleeding through.
Big Penn State. I know that Auburn Penn State game this weekend was.
Yeah, Brandon just bleeding Nittany Lions. It's not bleeding blue. He's bleeding actual lions coming out of his blood. Other tight end note, Max Williams didn't run a ton of routes on Sunday, but did get 7 targets and 94 yards. Kind of interesting. Probably because it was a quasi-revenge game. He went to the University of Minnesota, beat up on the Minnesota Vikings. I think it's a revenge game there.
Yeah.
Also, I think that's the main thing there. Not going there yet, just noting that Max Williams did something. Talking about the Panthers, they are revolving around Christian McCaffrey and DJ Moore. Through 2 games, Moore leads at 20% of the targets. McCaffrey is 22%. Nobody else higher than 14%. Robbie Anderson does have 4 of 9 deep targets, but that's a pretty thin role. are we okay just kind of focusing on more McCaffrey, or are you still of interest in Terrace Marshall, Robbie Anderson, Dan Arnold, any of those guys?
No. I mean, it's not a good enough offense for that. So I'm stuck with
Don't let the Darnold people hear that. They're in the Twitter streets and they're very confident right now, and it's very scary.
Hey, I like Sam Darnold, but I don't think it's really the offense where he's going to support 4 skill position players, especially with
I listed 5. So
cool. Especially with McCaffrey accounting for so much of the offense out of the backfield. So for me, it's still DJ Moore and McCaffrey.
Final one. This is just one to note. Don't have to expand on it. But Cordero Patterson is awesome. Didn't play a ton of snaps in week 2, but got interesting usage. 7 carries and 6 targets for 69 yards. He also had 4 of 9 red zone chances. Mike Davis got none. I am fully out of Mike Davis. I am keeping an eye on Patterson. If his role were to expand a bit, I'd be there. Is he still a wide receiver / running back on FanDuel? He is.
I believe so, because
you can use a running back at wide receiver.
He keeps screwing up all of my. Well, you can use a 30% snap rate running back at wide receiver.
But he's also good. Imagine if you could get a wide receiver who would get you 6 targets, but would also get you 44% of the team's red zone chances and 7 carries.
I mean,
he's like Taysom Hill. If Taysom Hill could play football.
So the funny thing is, Mike Davis still has played between 2 games, 68% of snaps, and has run 63% of routes. By comparison,
his adjusted opportunities number was really good in week 2, but I don't care. He's dead. He's dead.
That's the thing is that's still pretty good, but it's not good enough for what we're looking for.
Yeah, agreed. So Mike Davis, dust. Cordero Patterson, deity. Dust or deity? That'll be a fun game. Let's go through some quick philosophical changes here, starting off with the Bills. I was keeping an eye on them because they didn't play well in week 1, and there had been some chatter, little buzz in the street about how, things didn't go well. Maybe they'll get Zach Moss active. Maybe they'll try to reestablish it. They kind of did in week number 2. Their early down first half pass rate was 48%. Usually they're at about 112% in that number, roughly. Just guesstimating. It could be because Josh Allen has struggled. It could be nothing. I think it's more so worth noting than something I'm going to react to right away. So let's get a temperature check for you on the Bills offense. Facing Washington, Washington's defense has not been immaculate through the first 2 games, but they're still, a good unit. Good defensive line. I think part of the Bills' issues have been their offensive line. So, temperature check on the Bills offense for you heading into week 3.
I don't know how to respond to a temperature check, specifically if you're looking for degrees or cloudy.
Take it however you want.
Partly sunny, those types of things. I would say probably cloudy with a chance of sunshine. How about that?
I think I said meatballs.
How about that? That was a good one. There's a chance that this could still just kind of come back.
You see the second movie?
I haven't seen the first movie.
Cloudy with a chance of meatballs is great.
Imagine thinking I watch any movies.
I used to work at a daycare. It was a great movie. You should watch it. You'd actually like it. I'm not being serious.
I think I would. I love animated movies.
That's pretty good.
Some of the best movies are just like those. Anyway,
you should watch it. It's pretty good.
So the thing with the Bills is that it's not like this huge conversation we even have to have. It's, do you want to play Josh Allen and do you want to stack him with Stephon Diggs? Because if you don't have to worry about this offense.
Yeah.
And
that is really not. Well, Manny to some degree, but let's see. What's Manny's workload, right? Not as good as I thought. Okay. Well, he's gotten 35% of the deep targets. That's 3 per game. That's actually not that bad. So,
I mean, there's Cole Beasley running 89% of the routes.
Cole Weasley.
Over
I
under.
guess that's actually a name. Never mind. I did not mean to assign Cole Beasley to the Weasleys. Sorry. Sorry.
He's got a 4.9 yard A-dot.
Yeah. I'm okay going elsewhere, I think. That could be a mistake. But
so all 3 of them have underperformed their expected workloads.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be a buy low opportunity. I was big on buying low on Stephon Diggs in week 2.
Yeah.
Eventually it's going to correct. And so we want to take advantage of that. But again, for me, I'm not really going to play Emmanuel Sanders. It's going to be Diggs and Allen for me. If anything.
I think that if they were playing a more attractive opponent, Like they're playing Washington. Let's say they were playing. Well, they're
like
playing Arizona.
Jimmy G or like Tom Brady.
Yeah. Jimmy G. Jimmy G is actually a good comp because like they can score points. So actually, yes, that's a good one. I think you were joking, but yes, I think that'd be a better one. So there you go. Derek Carr's kind of de-gaffing it up, and I love it. He's averaging 10.5 deep targets per game through 2 weeks. He was at 5.6 last year. His passing NEP per dropback number is 0.38, which is top notch. Darren Waller has 29% of the deep targets. Henry Ruggs is second at 24%. And I'm not saying that Ruggs' role is good enough to like justify using him. I think it's still mostly about Darren Waller in this offense, but like Derek Carr's kind of not playing bad. Thoughts for you on the Raiders offense?
Again, up. But are we ever going to play Derek Carr in DFS?
No, probably not. But I would say he's less of a cross-off now than he was, even if he's still a cross-off.
Sure. The reason we're not going to play him is that he doesn't run the ball. And you have to be hyper efficient and basically throw for like 350 yards and 4 touchdowns to put up a huge game. So Carr's probably out. This backfield's out. Henry Ruggs is a little bit interesting. He had 3 downfield targets in week 1 with almost a 17-yard ADOT. Caught 5 of 7 targets in week 2 for that 113 and the touchdown with a double-digit ADOT. He's going to be volatile. So in the right situations, Henry Ruggs is on the radar, but he's like kind of a GPP bring back because we're not going to stack him with Derek Carr. So again, it all almost just comes down to like, do you want to play Darren Waller? And the answer is going to be yes. So I love this shift. But for me, it's not enough to like play Derek Carr or.
Well, I think it does increase the interest in Waller though, because part of the reason that Waller was annoying was that like, it's like a bunch of like bunny targets, but it's not that anymore.
Yes. So I'm saying arrows up on the offense, arrows up for Waller, but even with that, it's kind of still just Waller and occasionally some Ruggs if the matchup's right.
Agreed. So let's move now to looking at some pace stuff that you dug up, some pace and pass rate shifts. What'd you see in week 2 that caught your attention?
I actually just did some pace stuff because you were talking some pass rates for the Bills, but the one thing that really stood out to me was that Dallas returned to a league high pace. Looking at their plays, their offensive plays, when their pre-snap win probability was between 20 and 80%. So kind of just weeding out those garbage plays. So they were the fastest team in week 2. They were still kind of fast playing Tampa Bay in week 1. So that's really good to see. Teams who have ranked top 6 in pace both weeks now include New England, which even though they play fast, not really appealing. Washington's interesting because if Taylor Heineke is relevant and, we have Terry McLaurin, Logan Thomas, Antonio Gibson, that could be good for the bringbacks.
And I think that one's sticky too, because Washington, their OC wants to play fast. So I think that one's sticky as well.
And then Atlanta has played fast both weeks. Now
it helps their opponents. Let's go Saquon.
That's, I think, the big takeaway here is that even if we don't love the offenses so much, it does help the other side of the ball. Now, the opposite end of the spectrum, teams that have ranked bottom 5 each week, just Denver and Pittsburgh right now. So I know we like Denver. We like Cortland Sutton. We talked about him. Still a little bit of a concern here. And then Pittsburgh with all of their question marks. Another reason why Najee Harris at, I think, 7,500 is what he is. A little bit hard to kind of get around. And then one other thing that jumped out to me, the Rams had a really small relevant sample because they blew out the Bears in week 1. But their pass rate went from 75% to 52% in these context-dependent situations in week 2, and their pace climbed like 5 seconds. So the Rams looked amazing in week 1, a little less so in week 2. So I'm really hoping to see how that pans out in week 3 against the Bucs.
Against the Bucs, over under 80% pass rate for them.
Over.
Okay, good. I agree. I really hope so for that game. Let's finish up here with a note to future me. We've kind of alluded to this out the podcast, but things we want to keep in mind as we get closer to Thursday, because a lot of times this data is fresh in our minds. We may have better takeaways now than we'll have when we're further removed from it. So Brandon, what are the key takeaways for you? Notes to future Brandon here.
Yeah. And also just before I start like reading other information and hearing other things, then I start to forget what I feel like. I'm going to say, and I think we'll probably have both of these. So I'll just take one, but it's going to be to play Saquon Barkley. I'll leave the other one for you. I think play Saquon at 6,000 is going to be a key for me. And then also these games are starting to separate with their over-unders. We kind of saw that in week 2 as well, where week 1, things were a little bit tighter with the over-unders and the spreads being just kind of was just natural for week 1. Then things start to separate more. We're starting to see like elite games with these 50 plus over-unders. I just want to make sure I'm not chasing the bad games. I understand that the Dallas and the Chargers game wasn't all it was supposed to be, but long-term it's a winning strategy. So I don't want to bail on that. So I'm going to be having a short player pool for my core plays with these games that have totals over 50. I think the Bucks just went up to 54.5 too.
The Chiefs Chargers game is posted at 54.5. It's a 7-point spread. My cardinal rule is never to bet against Patrick Mahomes. I think 7 is a good number, is what I would say. That's what I would say. My note to future me is play Saquon, like you said. Also, don't dwell too much on things that burned you last week, specifically the Najee Harris thing with regards to Saquon. Like, don't get nervous in going all in on Saquon because it didn't go well last week. And don't get nervous about the Chargers because of the way things went there. There was a lot of flukiness in the way that game went down, a lot of weird penalties. I think that they have a bad taste in my mouth from the way that Saquon went and the way that the Charger stacks went, but I think, or the way that Najee went and the way that the Charger stacks went. But I still think I can be aggressive in undersalaried running backs like Saquon Barkley and be aggressive in stacking good games. And I think that Chargers game is going to be a good game. So that's the notes to future me for week number 2. That is all that we have here for today on this Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, wrapping up week number 2. As always, we are back once again on Thursday, though, to get you set for week number 3. That will be live on the FanDuel YouTube page at 10 a.m. on Thursday. And we'll go up on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed after that. So search for the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. While you're there, hit subscribe and leave us a rating and review as well. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm at Gadula13, GDULA13.
And I'm at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. We'll have more NFL discussion here on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages today. Monday at 4 p.m., Ryan Williams and Jessica Gridiron will be here to preview Monday Night Football between the Packers and the Lions. If you want to talk some single-game DFS or some betting, swing by and talk to Ryan and Jessica at 4 p.m. today. But until then, good luck with all your lineups. We'll talk to you once again on Thursday to get you set for week number 3. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.